There are different strokes for different folks, right? But did you know that this cliche applies to working through sin patterns and temptations? In this video, I'm going to share with you the 3 ways that the Bible teaches to overcome sin and temptation. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, Rick Thomas here. We're helping people live effective lives. In Matthew 5:30, Jesus said, "And if your right hand offends you, if it causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go to hell." The first way that you overcome sin and temptation, the approach I call the Amputation Approach, which we get right out of Matthew 5:30. Now, in this passage, Jesus is teaching that if your hand offends you or if your eye offends you, you should pluck it out or you should cut it off so it doesn't offend, and you should throw it away. That is amputation. Now, he's using hyperbolic language. Jesus does this often. In Luke 14, he says, if you don't hate your father, your mother, your brother and sister, you cannot follow him. Again, Jesus was a master teacher, and he used hyperbole sometimes to communicate his points. And so in Matthew 5, he's not saying that you should cut off your hand. He's not saying that you should pluck out your eye. He is using an illustration that if something is coming into your life, it is a picture of how you should think about and you should respond to those sin problems. Sometimes you should just cut off what tempts you. And so the first way that you overcome sin and temptation is amputation. Now let me ask you a couple of questions that maybe can stimulate your thoughts as far as things that you can cut out of your life. Should you say no to food? Now, food is not a sin per se, but it can be to you, and you may need, the best thing that you could do is to cut it off. Should you resist the temptation to shop? For some people, that is a big problem, and they fall into that trap. Should you turn off the television? We have a new term in our culture today. It's called binge watching. Maybe watching too much television, you should just amputate it. Should you walk away from social media? Should you stop engaging someone of the opposite sex because it's causing you to fall into temptation? Should you get up on time and go to bed on time because maybe you are a procrastinator or, well, a person could be lazy? And then finally, should you put blocks on your computer to stop looking at certain things? What is in view here are external habits and behaviors. In some cases, the cessation of sin is accomplished instantaneously through the cutting off method or amputation. But that is not always the case. There are other situations where the battle is more severe, it's more intense, where cutting the sin out of your life, it doesn't end the temptation. There is more work to do. It is also true how the ongoing temptation to sin, it could be a measure of God's kindness to you. Think about the temptations in your life and look at it from this angle for just a moment. Perhaps the Lord allows things to come into your life to help you to draw closer to Him. Now, we see something about this dynamic happening in 2 Corinthians 12, where the Lord permitted this thorn in Paul's flesh, whatever that may be. But what we do know is God permitted it, and it allowed Paul to grow closer to God. The practice of resistance is one way to build strength. But the big idea here is that sometimes it is very wise that you cut off those things that tempt you and potentially could cause you to fall into sin. The second approach, in addition to amputation, is mortification. In Romans 8:13, here's what Paul said, "For if you live according to the flesh, you may die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." I want you to think about this phrase here, to put to death. In Romans, Paul introduces another idea for overcoming sin problems. He asks you to mortify the deeds of the body. That's why I called it mortification. Now, in our modern Bibles, and I just recited to you the English Standard Version where it said put to death, and you'll read that language. It really means to make dead or put to death. Mortification is different from amputation. Mortification is different from cutting something away from you. Mortification suggests you may need another method to overcome sin and temptation. Sometimes you amputate it, and other times you mortify. In some situations, you may have to do both. The mortification of sin reduces the vitality of it. Mortification reduces the strength of that sin in you. It reduces it up to the point until it dies, and then it is gone. It takes its strength away. I have often illustrated this idea by using the common cold analogy. I can wipe my child's nose when she has a cold, and let's call that amputation. And it will take away the manifestation of the problem visibly and maybe bring some comfort to her, but it will only be limited external help, and that's what amputation is. But these behaviors and practices, they're not going to address the root cause. We're talking about a common cold here. The problem is deeper than external solutions, and this is what I was saying earlier. Sometimes you want to do both, amputation and mortification. In the case of mortification, the disease is in the body, or in case of the common cold that I'm illustrating here. And so there needs to be an internal solution. Therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my child medication. And I'm going to trust that the medication will render dead the disease that is internally affecting her. I could tell my child to stop coughing, but that would probably exasperate her because she can't stop coughing. She can't quit. It's going to take time. The mortification of sin is a matter of the heart. It's an internal operation. Let me give you just a sample list, and hopefully it will stimulate your thoughts as you think about these types of sins. I mentioned food earlier as something that you may need to cut off, amputation. But as you look internally at the food problem, here's the question. Do you have a lust for food? A lust for food is a different matter. That's an internal thing. Therefore, you want to mortify that lust. You want to take the vitality or the strength out of it. Here's another one. Bitter towards someone who has wronged you. All of us have been wronged by somebody. Everybody's got their list. I hope you don't fixate on yours. But if you do fixate on that list, you could grow bitter toward that person, toward that institution, toward that church, toward that group of people. That's bitterness, and you need to mortify that. Number 3, wrongly motivated by guilt. Say that you have lived in an abusive situation and you have been demeaned and put down all of your life, and now you feel inferior and insecure, and you live in that guilt, that internal shame that you carry around with you, and that can wrongly motivate you. You can't just amputate that. It doesn't work that way. You have to make it dead. Here's a 4th one, afraid of what others think about you. The Bible calls this fear of man, or peer pressure. The culture calls it codependency. It's another type of insecurity where you are controlled or managed by the opinions of other people. You're not going to amputate that. No, you're going to have to make dead this internal problem that you're struggling with. Number 5, worried about making poor decisions. Some people go into paralysis when it's time to make a decision, and some of that's tied to what will others think about me. Again, a mortification issue. Number 6, regretting a wrong decision from the past. Some people are fixated as they stare in the rearview mirror all the time, looking into the past, regretting some of the decisions that have rolled out for them. Well, that's a mortification issue. And then finally, number 7, you're anxious about how God thinks about you, how God views you. Some people have that problem. And so whether it's lust for food, bitter towards someone, wrongly motivated by guilt, afraid of what others think, worried about making poor decisions, regretting wrong decisions from the past, or anxious about how God views you, that is just a short sampling of how some people can get all bound up internally, and amputation won't work, but mortification, to take the vitality or take the strength out of that, it does. And so we have amputation, we have mortification, and then we have limitation. In Hebrews 12:1, the Hebrew writer said, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight." Let us lay aside, let us limit them, and sin that clings so closely to us. And let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. You probably have heard the illustration about the runner who runs with leg weights. It's not wrong to run with leg weights, but if you really want to run the race with endurance, you need to set those things aside so you have more freedom. Sometimes you need to limit the things that hinder you, even though those things, they might not be sinful. The Hebrew writer is teaching how you should lay aside the weight that's hindering. Now, he's not saying the hindrance is a sin. It doesn't have to be a sin, but it can be a negative influence in your life. If you have negative influences that are not necessarily evil, but if it keeps you from running the race with endurance, then you may want to lay it aside. Sometimes non-sin things can be sinful to a specific individual, and that's why you want to limit the practice or the participation in those activities. You might not be able to make a biblical case for it being sin, but you don't have to. But you really need to be honest about a temptation that can grab your heart. Now, there are many illustrations of non-sin things that can be sinful and can hinder you and in this enduring race that you are running for Christ. Let me give you a few examples. Television is not sinful. I've already mentioned earlier, binge watching probably is. Technology, alcohol, friends, Facebook, money's not sinful, but yet it can be a temptation. Those are just a few examples of non-sin things that can work against you, even to the point of leading your heart into sin. And so the three ways that we overcome sin and temptation, according to Scripture, are amputation, mortification, and limitation. Now, it's important to have a comprehensive understanding of your temptations, your weaknesses, your sin patterns, so you can be vigilant in refraining from the things that keeps the Lord's glory from being reflected by your life. You must think realistically about how and why you sin, as well as putting into practice biblically informed methods that enable you to conquer the things that want to defeat you. And of course, you're not alone in this warfare, in this battle. Your efforts, your human responsibility, your role of being a doer of the Word, as James talked about, it happens under and in and through the empowering favor of God. God will give you favor to implement, He will give you grace to implement these three ideas into your life. If you would like to talk about these things, or if we can serve you in any way, there's a link here that will take you to a couple of places. One, everything that I just shared with you, you can read it or listen to it from a podcast on our website. And then the other link will take you to our free community forums on our website, where we can engage you in a better environment, where we can help you with any question that you may have, whether it's about this idea of amputation, mortification, limitation, or maybe something else. And then finally, if you appreciate these videos that we're putting out, if you just hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that will continue to help us to grow, where we can reach more people. Thank you so much for listening to the video. I meant to say watching, but I do podcast. And I've been saying listening for 1,200 times. Don't put that in the video.